Okay, so I've just added in some design elements. These are mostly families that I've loaded from the library. So this chair, for example, is one that you'll all be able to find in that Revit library folder I showed you last week. And that's a table from the same folder. Most of these things are just components that I've loaded. There's a few extra walls and things that I've placed. And so there's some walls over here, again, just to fill in the design a little bit. And then, again, some more furniture elements that I've loaded. And one or two that I have modelled. And I know that we haven't gone right into the modelling tools yet. Touched on it, but we're going to go further with that next week. And if you're interested in using the modelling tools, just remember, model in place is where you want to start with those. We have gone into that a little bit. And for things like furniture that I've made there, which is basically built-in wardrobes and things, most of the time, even if you're not sure how to make all the finished geometry that you need, you can just make extrusions and just block out the form that you want and then come back later and refine it. But even just with a simple extrusion like I've got there, you can do a lot then with the materials, and that's what I want to get onto. So you've got at least made a start on materials and got a good idea of the process used to assign them, but also to make the materials themselves. So I'll start with one of the main elements, and that could be your floor. And so notice there, I've selected the floor just by clicking inside it. I haven't had to go to the edge. So if that isn't working for you, make sure you've got the option down on the bottom right. You'll see there's this option, select element by face. So I've turned that off. So it's got a little red cross on it now. And if I try and click in the middle, I can't select my floor. But if I turn that back on, then I can select the floor by clicking on the face or anywhere in the middle there. I don't have to find the edge. That makes it much easier, especially when you get to this stage and you're focusing more on the surfaces that you want to put your materials on. So I've got my floor selected, and now I'm going to go to Edit Type, and then firstly we'll think about the type of the floor. So this floor at the moment is still generic 150. I want to make a new kind of floor that's going to have a timber floor finish. So I'm going to hit Duplicate and call it that. So timber floorboards is enough. I'm the only person who's going to see this most likely, so that just tells me what kind of floor it is. And then OK. And then I'm going to click Edit next to the structure. So just remember, I've duplicated once so far. Now I'm going to click Edit to get to the structure where I can actually see the material. At the moment, it's not really set to anything. It's by category, which means it uses basically a default setting. So it has a setting, but it doesn't have anything that we can relate to yet. It's set by category. So you click there, though, to adjust the material or to assign it, and you'll get the Browse button there. That's the little button that comes up with the 3 dots on it. Click there, and then once you browse for the material, it'll bring up the material browser. So this is where it gets... Oh, you can make it. And that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to make a new material now. So you've got basically I'm going to say 2 aspects. You've got the list on the left here. So these are all of the materials in my project file. So down the bottom, you'll see there actually is a reasonable selection of wood materials there already, but I'm going to make a new one. So one option for making a new material is to start with one that's close to what you want, and then duplicate it and make some changes. So I'll start with one that you should have. Well, let's start with this one, timber. Mm-hmm. Oh, so there are some stone materials if you go up in the list. There's masonry. Yeah. So you've got a few different, where is it? Yeah, you've got this masonry material, which is close to stone. And if you go further down, there are some other stone materials around. Here, so you've got that site hardcore material, that's another stone type material. And look, they don't even need to be that close because you can change it as much as you need to. there is another option completely, which is to make a brand new material, and that's what this part of the bottom's for. So that's to make a brand new material. But here, I do want to start with one that's already there, just to show you that approach. And so I'll start with this one, timber, which you can actually see is white. It's for painted timber. But I'm going to make it into timber that's going to show my floorboards. So I just want to show you this process. So when you right-click on this list, you can duplicate, and that's going to make a copy of the material. And so then I'm going to call it timber floorboards. So that's the name that we're assigning to our floor. But then that material, remember, it's a container. So it's got these different aspects. The identity's always there, but then the other ones are kind of optional. In fact, you'll always have graphics as well. But then after appearance, you can click on the plus to get those other aspects that I showed you briefly in that book, the physical and the thermal assets. But again, most of the time you don't need those. But it's good just to think about that idea of materials having multiple aspects. But for you, the most important ones are the graphics and the appearance. So starting with the graphics, this is where it gets kind of confusing because the graphics is always tied to this name over here, timber floorboards. So if we make a change, I know this sounds obvious, but it's got to be pointed out, it's going to change timber floorboards. So if I change graphics, I'll change the colour maybe to get more of a wood type colour. Something like that. And then I'll change the surface pattern. And now here again it gets a little bit confusing because they've added this option, you can have a foreground and a background. But you don't need to use both of those. And I think it's best just to start with one, and generally you just need to use the foreground. So for the time being, just ignore the background. And here I want the surface, in other words, what I see on the outside of this floor, to change. I'm not worried about the cut pattern just yet. So I'm going to go to the foreground for the surface pattern, and click where it says none. Okay, and then the basic rule of thumb for surface patterns is that you should always use model. In fact, I wish they would just disable the option for drafting. It's not really needed. So you set model. We'll get into the reason for that later, but for now just go with it. So set model for the surface patterns and then choose the pattern you want, or you can make your own. The ones here would actually be fine because I just want vertical or horizontal lines. So I've got some different vertical and horizontal patterns, but maybe I'll show you, I'll make a different size vertical pattern. So I've got 150mm horizontal, but I don't have 150mm vertical. So I'm going to click, I'll do a brand new one. So I'm going to click new pattern. And then you can see you set up just like a crosshatch. You can do more complex patterns using custom, but I'll just leave it on basic. And then parallel lines. I'll set my line angle to 90. Foreground. Yeah. And then I'll change my line spacing to 150. And I'm going to call this 150mm vertical. That's it. So I've got vertical lines that are 150mm apart. Click OK. And then I'll just show you how that looks for now. So I'm going to click OK again, and then again, and again. And we've got vertical lines for our floorboards, which may make sense. From a design point of view though, it would look probably nicer if we had the boards running lengthways. Sometimes you don't have a choice. Some of this comes back to the construction because it depends on the direction of your joists.
Doesn't this way of line also demonstrate you're trying to make a room appear wider?
That's right.
So it's still kind of
Yeah, it can work. It can work.
narrow.
Depends what you're going for. That's right. Yeah, so it could work. So that's something we can even look at. If you make a perspective view now, you can see those lines. And that's a nice thing to try. So there you can see. Yeah, it's not too bad. I'll just hide some of these walls so you can see more of the flooring. And so I can see those floorboards because, or I can see those lines because I'm in a hidden line view. And if I go to shaded, I'll see them as well, and now we get the colour that I set. But then if I go to realistic, we don't see those things anymore. Right, so I just wanted you to see that, because now I'm going to select the floor again. Doesn't matter if I just do it in this view, that's fine. And then back to edit type, edit the structure, and then there's my material, timber floorboards, browse, and I can continue this time setting up the appearance. So I've done the graphics. So hopefully you can see the graphics tab sets the way the material appears in those hidden line and shaded views. So it's a simple display in a way. It gives you lines or a pattern made of lines and a colour. But then the appearance is where you set the render appearance of the material. And that's where you get the more full-blown options where you can put textures in and all the things that you use with rendering. And this is where it gets a bit more confusing, because these appearance aspects can be shared. And this is probably the thing that gives people the most trouble at first with materials in Revit. The fact that appearances can be shared. I actually wish they just didn't ever give you the option. It's not really necessary most of the time. But you can always check for it. It's quite easy to check. You just look here where you've got that hand. So if there's a number there, that means it's shared. If it says 0, I'll just show you another one. So if there's a 0, it's not shared, and it's fine. So watch out for that. When you see a number, the general rule of thumb is get rid of it. And there are two approaches. You can either right-click on appearance or use the buttons over here. They do the same thing. So when you right-click, you get the options either to duplicate or replace. Both of those options are going to clear this number and make it so that it's not shared anymore. So if I choose duplicate, that simply gives me a copy of that appearance. No changes, still as it was, but it's not shared anymore. So it means that, so say if we have, I'll go back to this one. So that timber material that we've got in our project has this appearance called linen white. So if I find, I'm not sure which one it's shared with, but if you look at another material, it might be maybe the finished one. Yeah. Yeah, so if I choose this one maybe. Yeah, so here we are. So finish, completely different material, is sharing that appearance. It's also using linen white. So it helps for big projects where you do want to share appearances across different materials. But for most projects, it's not really very helpful. And so normally, you just want to stop that from happening. And again, it's the most confusing thing at first when you start working with materials in Revit. And the general rule of thumb is if you see a number there other than 0, just right-click on the appearance and choose duplicate, or you can choose the button over here with the 2 pages. That does the same thing.
So you mean that the material can be different than the finish is shared?
Yeah, the appearance is shared. That's right. Yeah.
The appearance and the finish.
Yeah, yeah. But the graphics could be different. Yeah. Yeah. I know it sounds confusing, but there are reasons. Like when you do big projects, often the render appearance will be need to be shared, or it helps if it's shared. Yeah, 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 pretty much, yeah, yeah. But then for construction, you want the hatch patterns to be different. That's all. But again, look, I think they could have easily not given that option, and I don't think many people would have missed it. But it's just something you've got to be aware is there. And again, normally just choose duplicate, but then the other great option, instead of duplicating, you can replace. And you can do that at any stage. So again, you can choose replace by right-clicking or click the button over here. It does the same thing. Replace. And replace gives you the appearance library. It's called the asset browser, but I call it the appearance library because that's really what it is. And then it helps you to remember which of these folders you should be looking at. Because a lot of the other things there are for thermal analysis and things that we don't need to worry about. But if you go to the appearance library, it's got all of these pre-made render materials, which is a great thing. Autodesk give this out with most of their 3D programs now, and it means that these render materials are consistent across all their programs, and they're made for you. And then you can adjust them, but you've got a good starting point. So if you go through these folders, if you go through ceramic, you've got a ton of tiles. If you go through concrete, you've got all these different concrete materials, fabric, got all these different fabrics, of course, masonry, you've got all the different bricks and lots of other masonry materials. CMU is just concrete masonry unit. Paint, you've got lots of basic paint finishes, even car paint, which is a really interesting material if you get right into it. And plastics, lots of plastics, of course. Roofing, lots of great stuff in there that would take a long time for you to set up, and it all comes with the program. So you might think I'm going to go to wood because I am trying to make a wood material, and it's worth looking at that because you've got lots of really good wood materials, mostly North American wood, but still you can modify it once you get that starting point. So they're good, but I'm not going to go there. I'm going to go up to flooring, and you'll see it's got its own wood subfolder which has lots of floorboard materials. So I'll start with one of those. So maybe the beechwood. I'll double click. And then what you'll see is that it puts that into the appearance panel. And it's pretty cool. Oh, that's right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and there's different stains. So the beechwood natural, is a different image. Yeah, well, that's right. You can still change it afterwards, but it just gives you a starting point. Yeah, and so that's what you're right though. It uses the image for the colour instead of just having a single colour value. So, in the old days, not that long ago, when you used a 3D rendering program, you'd have to set all of this up from scratch and make your own materials and set the appearance and set the image and everything else. And there's a lot of setup. But now most of this is done for you, and you can just double click and see how they look. So actually I don't mind that one. So I've got that basic setup, and that's a huge thing. So it means I don't have to go and explain all the different mini aspects you've got to set these things up. And so once you've got the basic setup though, all I want to show you then is that you can change the image, if it is an image type material, simply by clicking on the file name. Now I don't mind this hickory wood, even though you can't get that in Australia really, but I don't mind it. But then you can use any image. So if you browse for that folder I showed you before on Student Resources, Material Design, Material Images, and I'm going to go to Wood, and I'll change the view to thumbnails. And I've got some cedar. Cedar is one of my favourite timbers ever because it looks pretty good, but also it's just an amazing wood generally. It's waterproof pretty much, naturally, and really durable, and it's a shame it's very expensive, but otherwise it is a great timber. So that's cedar, and so obviously it just wraps that over your surface, and it's going to look okay as it is. But then the final thing, to get that texture right, I'm going to click above the file name there on that image swatch, and that gives you the setting for the textures. I'll bring this out, and you can see then we've got these settings for the position and rotation, which I'm not going to worry about straight away. I'm just going to go down to the scale where you set the size. So once you start using image-based materials, we're generally working with real-world sizes. So if you look at a photo of something like floorboards, you can think about how big those floorboards are in real life. So if you look at this, we can see how many floorboards there are. It's between the two ends of the dimension there, and you can just count them. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 floorboards. How wide is a floorboard? Well, it varies, but roughly how wide? So? Twice as wide as half? I don't even know what it is.
So how wide is it? Is it twice as wide as half?
I have, yeah, sorry, my brain's a bit slow though.
How long is it?
Oh, twice as wide as half. Yeah, it's like what's the thickest two planks? Thickest two short planks? No. Yeah, thickest two short planks. That's it. Yeah, anyhow, but you've heard that one, haven't you? And that's well, yeah. You haven't heard that one? Thickest two planks? Thickest two short planks? No? No, anyhow.
I tend to
Yep.
miss things a lot.
Yeah. So then, if you know how many boards you've got, so we've got 10 boards, and the width does vary. Floorboards can probably go up to about 150 at most, to be about the widest, but they can go down to 80 mil. So you can then decide, okay, I want my floorboards, let's say you want them to be 100 mil, and that's easy maths too. So we've got 10 boards, 100 mil, 1,000. But then there's an old trick with 3D rendering. Sometimes it's better to make the materials a bit bigger than they would be in real life, just to make it clearer in the render. And people don't really notice that they're oversized, and in a way, they actually think it looks more realistic. Yeah, it's one of these old cheats. So I'm going to make it 1500, which means my boards would be 150. But that will look a bit better. So once you understand how to set the size, then you can easily work with images in your materials. And so there you can see I've got my floorboards, but maybe then I want them to go the other way. So I'll go back to the floor, edit, browse to find my material, and go to the appearance again, click on the image, and I want to change the rotation, so I'm going to make that 90, so they go the other way. I'll also go back and fix the graphics and make them 150 mil horizontal to match it as well. Okay, so now my boards go the other way. Yeah. Yeah, you've got to play around. Sometimes there's no right or wrong, it's just whatever you think looks good. But then in other cases with floorboards, unfortunately, it's not up to us because the floor structure determines the direction you have to go. Exactly, the resolution, that's right. And that's why you pay a fortune for the really high quality ones. This one's pretty good, but you can get 10 times that resolution easily. Yeah. Oh, so I'll go back to it. So yeah, so back to the material. Okay, so it's on the Appearance tab. You get the file name there, and that's where you can choose that. So just below that image. Oh yeah, so it depends on the sort of material. So that's why it's best to go to Replace. So when you right-click on the Appearance tab, go to Replace. Oh, so when you right-click on that Appearance tab, yep, and then you can choose Replace. Yep. And then find a material that already has a texture set up. So in the... So, yeah. Oh, first you've got to get a material that's got to contain or that's set up with that option. So, so if it's wood that you want, go to the wood folder in that Appearance library. Oh yeah, so masonry, some of it has, so yeah, the brick materials, they'll have a texture. So I'll do a brick one. So, yep. Yep. Yeah. 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 Yep. Yeah, so it's got to have the option to choose a material, choose an image file on the Appearance tab. Yeah, so replace it with one that does. So pretty much, yeah, but you know, it's best if you go, so there, it's pretty much masonry. Or there's a stone folder as well. And so most of those will have a texture. So say this river stone blue, even though it's nothing like probably what you want. So it's in the stone folder here, and then you've got river stone blue. So that's when you replace. So when you right click on the Appearance tab and go to Replace. Yep. And then expand the Appearance library folder on the left. And then you're going to see all the subfolders. and then go down to stone. That's got a heap of stone materials. And just double click on one that looks like it's using an image. And most of them will. And I want one like that, so I'm going to make one. I'll make one for the outside. So I'll just put a floor in quickly, and I will do a stone paver material. No. Once you've got it in there, then you can change the image to something else. So click on the file name for the image. You've got to double click on it to bring it into your Appearance tab. And then I'll just show you. And then you can browse to choose a different file. So I'll just do one like that, and then actually no, I'll move on to another sort of object because I just want to get go a bit further with assigning. So floors and walls, you might have noticed already, when you go to edit type, they look similar, and you've got basically the same option there to edit the structure, and that's how you should assign materials to those things. Because what I see a lot of people doing is using paint because it works. So using that paint tool, you can pick each surface. But if you've got to pick, say, every surface of a door or even a wall, it takes far longer than it should. And it's not really the right way. But I know with programs like SketchUp, that's what you get used to because that's how SketchUp works. But Revit's a bit more serious than that, and they can let you manage materials at the type level, which again means the way I've been showing you, click Edit Type, and then click Edit for the structure, and make sure you get to the material that way where it's an option. But then different objects like doors and windows, you'll see when you click Edit Type, it doesn't look anything like that. You don't have a structure that you can edit. So these objects are dependent on parameters that basically have been set up by other people. And this is where it can be a little bit confusing at first because for most of the things from the library, it's pretty clear. You'll have a material there, in this case for the door, and then one for the frame. And once you click there, you can browse and choose a material and make it the same way that I've done the other one. So I've got all the same options there. I'm not even going to change that material, I'm just going to show you how it comes up. But then different families are going to be set up differently. So this little chair, I know if I go to Edit Type, there's no material option there. And you'll find if you start downloading objects from different websites like Revit City, BIM Object, Herman Miller, all those places where you can get great Revit families, they're going to be set up like this because it all comes down to the person who's made the family. So I know there's no option for the material in the type properties when you click Edit Type, but there is an option here in Properties. Right, we'll get into the reasons for that later, but just wanting to see that you can get the material setting in different places. Sometimes it's in Edit Type, sometimes it's just in Properties like it is here. So that's a fabric, and maybe I'll make a fabric material. So I'll browse there. So this one's called Fabric Bed Linen. So I'll start with that one and just copy it, right click, duplicate, and we'll call it Fabric Seat. And so then going to the Appearance tab, there's a number there above the hand, so I'll either duplicate or replace. Either option works. So I'm going to replace. go to the Appearance Library, go to the Fabric folder, and then just find one that's similar to what I want. So I'll get the maybe one of the yellow, or the leather, the matte yellow leather. So again, I might have gone over this quickly, but you double click here to make it go into the Appearance tab, and then you can make the adjustments. It is locked when you're in here, deliberately. They don't want you to change this library. But then you can make all the adjustments you want once it's loaded into your project, and you can see it on the Appearance tab. There it is, leather matte yellow, and I can click on this image name or file name to choose either from the default set of files that you get with Revit, and there's a lot of them. These are all different material images. Or again, you can browse onto the P drive and go to Material Images and find different fabric. I might use the carpet, that'll do. That's a bit softer. So I'm happy with that. If I click on the image, I can check the size. That's probably all right. And I'll leave the bumps as they are. That's all right. So I'll get into all the different types of mapping. This is all we've been looking at so far is what's called a diffuse map or a colour map sometimes. All that means is that instead of setting a single colour value, it's using an image to give the colours, to give what colours we see on the surface. But that's only the tip of the iceberg when it comes to mapping channels. So you've got all these other different options. And that's just for this sort of material. We've got relief, which gives a bit of a bump sort of pattern. Emissivity is to do with lighting, essentially. And translucency, lots of different options. I might just show you a different kind of material so you can see a few of the others.
Is that the new one? Is that a good one to show shadow on?
No, it's the opposite. It'll take the shadows away because it makes it glow. Yeah, but it's the right idea, but it's all to do with lighting. So you can make materials. This is where it gets really tricky because we're going to do lights next week. And so you put these light objects in your space to light things up. But these days, most rendering programs, especially any modern ones, will let you do object-based lighting. In other words, a material can be a light source. And in a lot of the newer rendering programs, there's no difference between using a light source or using a material to do your lighting, which is great. So that way you can have a light box or something that just needs to glow, and you don't need to make a special light. You just make a material and make the material glow, and it lights your scene up. So that's the new approach. Well, it's been around for about 10, 15 years, but it's still coming in. But what I want to really show you is a generic material. Here we are. So that you can see a few of the other channels that you have. So reflectivity, transparency, cutouts is another really interesting one if you need to do things like lattice screens and things like that. You don't model it. You often just use a cutout map. And again, self-illumination, that's the glowing. Bumps, tints, you can all do all those things and have them controlled with image files. And maybe I'll just quickly come back and show you some of the ones I've done like this, so you can get an idea how it's a practical thing you can use. And so here you can see this material has a texture, has some depth to it. That is done with a black and white file that essentially does the bumps. And a lot of the detailing in here that is also done with materials. That roofing is also mostly just a material. Not too many other complex ones here actually, but that'll give you some idea. Oh, the grass, there we go. So the grass again, mostly that's the material. Even though it looks 3D, it is mostly done with texturing. Yeah. I didn't do the design, but yeah, I did all the 3D. Yep. So yes, my website, or one of them. So I've got to fix it up. No, I've got to update that. I've got so much better stuff, but anyhow. So that's just to give you a bit of an overview of the different options you've got with the render materials especially. I'm going to go back to that fabric material that I have just created. If I can remember what I called it, fabric seat, there it is, yep. And so it's still there. And yeah. So, and once you understand these ideas, they carry across to all the different 3D rendering programs. The concepts are basically the same. So if I go to realistic here, you'll see, you can see that texture in the plan view as well. So to put all that together, once you've got those things set up, you make a camera view, and again, we'll keep going with lighting and the other things that you need next week. But my seat there, you can see, now that I've extended the view a bit, and you can see the wood texture, of course, as well. But then the material and the geometry gets put together with the lighting, and I don't have very many lights inside at the moment, so I'm just going to leave it on sun for the light and see if I can get something to happen here. I haven't even checked my sun direction, so it may not work, but let's see, it should do something. And I don't have the voids for my stairs either, so I'm probably not going to get a lot of light. Let's see what happens though. We should get some light from the, I've got a door behind me. Yeah, there we are. So I know it's very dark. It's the way it looks when you don't have any interior light even on a sunny day, but luckily you can adjust the exposure and usually bring that up enough to be able to see what's happening, and yeah. Yep. So once we've got some lights in there, that'll be far better, but anyway, that's just to give you an idea. So yeah, but the main battle with materials is that firstly there are different ways of assigning materials, just to go over that again. So walls and floors pretty much work the same way, but then most other things, they can be done differently. So furniture, again, sometimes it is when you click Edit Type. In other cases though, it might be just in Properties here. For yet other things, it won't be anywhere. So don't worry, if you can't find it, it's not you, it's usually the person who made it. And here, even though I know there is an option there, when you get that little drop-down arrow, that doesn't work because that's set up for their own custom setup that they've done, which you don't have access to. So there's no material option that's going to work for this shelf. So I'll show you later how you can add those options, but for the time being you can just avoid those or just leave them if you can't get to the material. But you should at least be able to get to the material for your floors, walls, ceilings that we're going to get to next week, and most of the loaded families like the furniture and the doors and windows. You see you will get those options, sorry not for that one, but there's a bed and there'll be an option there for the material, hopefully for that one. Oh no, that's not the right bed. But the table, there we go, it's got the material options there. So just change the ones that you can. And, oh yeah, and then just remember, once you do finally get to the option where you can work the materials or adjust the materials, you've got the graphics tab, but then you mostly should be focusing on the appearance tab to set up your render materials, and just make sure you think about when you need to duplicate or replace, and try and get maybe some textures or some image files for your appearance. Would be good. So that's probably enough to get you going with materials. Can't think of any other major things. There's plenty more. You can go forever with materials, but that should give you a pretty good overview. Try out different displays as well. See how they look with shaded as opposed to realistic. And probably even an idea to start trying some rendering, because obviously the way the materials look when they're rendered can be fairly different to how they look even in the realistic views. So here you can see it's adding the glossiness and... Oh yeah, sure, yeah, of course, yeah. So I'll get onto shininess, how you adjust those things when we go further into materials later on. But yeah, that should be enough to get you going. And yeah, once we get the lights next week, then it should all start coming together.